All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Lasting Learning Podcast. Super glad that you are here. Today, I've got a guy on this show who I have been admiring for years. He's a guy who, to be quite honest, 3-4 years ago, I was in a rough place in my job, and things were hard. I was working in a school where I felt like I was on an island. I was down in Florida, just felt so far away from everything. And then out of nowhere, this guy from Canada starts connecting with me via Twitter and social media and made me feel so much value. And I am super, super excited to have this amazing human being on the show with us tonight. Tonight, we got Roman Nowak joining us from the Great White North, hoping for a snow day tomorrow, right, Roman?
That's what everyone's talking about. That was the talk of the day.
It's crazy to think that even in Canada, there are snow days. But yes, even in Canada, there are snow days. So, Roman, talk to us a little bit. Tell us all who you are, what you're about, where you are, and what you're doing.
So I live just outside of Ottawa, which is the capital of Canada, in Ontario. So almost dead center, the biggest province. But I'm not originally from here. I'm actually from Southern Ontario, not far from Toronto. And I'm in my 15th year of education. Most of that time I did spend at the high school level, but I did start out while I was finishing my bachelor's degree in university. I did start out doing some occasional teaching, some supply teaching, some small contracts because there was such a shortage of teachers. And at that point, I was doing a lot of elementary school supply teaching. And then after that, once I sort of felt what the high school level was like, I'm like, you know what, this is my place. And so I've sort of been there. I've been back in my school for 2 years because before that, when we actually got to know each other, for 3 years, I was actually working with the government, working on policies and programs to support student success in the various districts across our province. So it was more of a leadership role, a great experience, but honestly, super happy to be back working with students on a daily basis. I'm an English teacher and reading is my jam and having fun with my kids. So that's pretty much who I am. But what I do like to tell people is English is my second language. I work in a French school. That's my third. Polish is actually my first. And so when I work with English language learners, I like to always talk about my story and say, you know what, if I could come from learning other languages and being comfortable and working in those languages, there's no reason why you can't. And so I try to really go on that personal level with them so they could connect and feel like they could do anything.
That's awesome. I feel like we're going to have a social studies class right now because there's so much I think that we need to deconstruct for so much of this audience, because the vast majority of this audience lives here in the United States. And although Canada's right next door, I live in Michigan and I get the opportunity to go to Canada quite a bit. For some people, I mean, Canada could be on the other side of the world for all that matter. We know that you guys are super nice and you are super polite. You use kilometers instead of miles. But
Yes.
other than that, I mean, let's just break it down a little bit. You have provinces, not states.
Yeah.
You live in Ontario. So you said Ottawa. Describe where Ottawa is in Canada, just so people can get some perspective. And talk about the snow day that we were just joking about a little bit.
Yeah, so we actually have provinces and territories. So we have 3 territories, 10 provinces. And so I guess you'd call us, I'm Central East is what we sort of, I guess, call us. Where I'm from originally, not far from Toronto. We did have snow days back then, but there wasn't as much snow. When you come up to Ottawa, which is a little bit further north, but then when you talk to my friends from the north, they say we're really not north. We get a lot more snow here and a lot colder weather. But snow days in Canada are very different than the States. Because when I talk to my friends in the States, usually a snow day, they close the school, you get a day off.
Yeah.
Here, snow days, students don't go to school, but teachers are expected to go to school. And actually, if you're at the elementary school level, really it's school buses that are canceled. Schools will always remain open. So a lot of parents will still drop off their kids at school and it's a school day. At the high school level, though, those teenagers don't want to be there. So we pretty much, as teachers, get a day for some PLC time, for learning, for grading, but we still have to report to work. Tomorrow may be a little bit different just because the amount of snow we're getting, but we'll see how it goes.
So that's legit. So where I am in Michigan, which is still, it's north. I'm going to say it's north.
Yeah.
We're close to that. We got the 45th parallel that runs through our state. So we're pretty far up there. We closed school today. When we're recording this, it's the end of February. We closed school today. When I woke up this morning, I could still see green grass. It didn't start snowing until about 9 o'clock, but school was already canceled. It was actually canceled last night, just in anticipation. I mean, we're not as bad as like down in Atlanta or in Alabama, where a week ahead of time they start to see that a flake might fly, so they cancel just so everybody can stay out and watch for the flake. So you're expecting what, 15 inches? You said tonight?
Anywhere between 15 to 20 inches in the next 24 hours. So
Oh, that's
that
awesome.
would possibly close our school down. Otherwise, we can get 8 to 10 inches and we still have to make it into work.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Okay, so we got that part down. Now let's talk about your 3 languages, because that is super, super interesting to me, especially since you say reading is your jam. I want to deconstruct that a little bit too.
Okay.
So talk to us. How does a Polish speaking French Canadian guy end up speaking English all over? I mean, talk to us about that. How did Polish become that native language and everything else that you know?
So my parents are both immigrants from Poland. They actually met in Montreal, which is in our neighboring province in Quebec. They didn't know each other when they immigrated. Met actually around the time of the Montreal Olympics in 1976. And then they moved to Southern Ontario, and it was sort of a political decision here in Canada, but grew up really speaking Polish all the time. I learned my English by watching TV as a kid, and then the neighbors that we had sort of around. And then my mom, who really wanted us to fit into the country and have every opportunity given to us, because Poland back then was a communist country, she wanted us to learn French, which is our second official language. So they sent us to a French school. So I went to kindergarten in a full French school, not speaking a word, and my sister as well, learning French. Then we did our high school in an English school, went back to university still in English, and then ended up back in a French school system. So it's Polish, English, then French, but I married a French Canadian, and actually we live completely in French. My daughters speak French, very little English right now. So it's sort of a choice, and I work with French Canadians. It's this weird sort of mashup of everything, and I learned Spanish. I almost had a minor in my diploma in Spanish, and I've just, I think, been always a language person.
Wow.
But it's just, I always find it interesting to talk to students and those who struggle and say, do you know what? If I could really make it in my third language and work in that every day, do you know what? You can do anything.
Do you find yourself just switching mid-conversation languages, or are you able to stay in your lane?
I think with my wife, we'll usually flip-flop in English and French in between conversations. It's just sort of a go with the flow. But if I'm thinking in French and I'm talking to French people, it's just I stick in that language. And then I could what's the word I'm looking for? Compartmentalize.
Compartmentalize. There you go.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's funny, as I work with more French Canadians, I find I have more of an accent when I talk in English. But if you met me, let's say 25 years ago, completely different.
Wow. That's crazy. Now, you talk about the fact that you're in a French school, and this is going to be a completely different concept for most of us here in the States, where we say everybody has to speak English, no matter what your native language is. We teach everybody English. In a French school, that's everybody's native language, and everything is just taught in French, or is there a bilingual component there as well?
So to be able to go to French school, it's usually either a parent or a grandparent has been either in a French school or is a French native speaker. Otherwise, you can still get in. You still have to just go through a sort of a committee process to make sure that there's the support that you need. But pretty much your entire day, everything is taught in French with the exception of your English class. And English only starts usually around grade 4. Before that, everything is done in French.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Yeah, there's so much to go there. So when you talk about reading being your jam, when you read, what language do you read in?
French and English. I am an English teacher, so I think I read more heavily in English, and that's also because I try to read a lot of books that I could then suggest to my students. But I think reading was always an escape for me, was a way to be creative, was a way to learn about all these other things that I couldn't experience because we came from a lower income family. And so a lot of the different experiences that everyone had, we couldn't necessarily have. And so books were sort of my way out. So I always loved reading. And now as a teacher, when I hear students who say, well, we don't like reading and this and that, I try to really work hard talking to a lot of people who teach reading and who work with literacy and try and find those books that really open up that passion with kids.
Oh, it's fascinating. I feel like I could just sit on that conversation for a long time, but I know it's probably selfish on my part and the social studies nerd in me that wants to go there. So I'll deviate a little bit. So in Canada, um, it's a huge country, lots of people there, and I know a lot of people don't think of that. They think, okay, there's Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa. They think about maybe Vancouver. They'll throw the big
Yes.
cities out there, but it is a huge country. In Canada, where is the place to go? Like when you want to do some of your learning, your growing, your networking, where do you go? Where do you travel to? What do you do in Canada?
If I'm talking more professional development,
Personal, professional, whatever. Yeah, go wherever you want to go with it.
yeah. So professional wise, I would say Ottawa, there's this small hub, mostly Toronto. But it's a different culture here. I mean, when I talk to all my friends in the States, teachers are used to spending out of pocket, going to all these amazing conferences across the country. If you're in larger cities, it's even cheaper to fly. I find in Canada, it's mostly our districts that pay for conferences. So very few Canadian teachers will actually pay out of pocket to actually go and travel to different conferences or PD sessions. It's usually part of that job opportunity. Uh, but it tends to be given by districts most of the time because that culture is not instilled in what we have. We do have a lot of historical aspects. So for families or for teachers who teach social studies or history, geography, a lot of times people go to national parks, go to museums. And I mean, Ottawa is the capital, so we have so many museums. So with my kids, we tend to sort of gravitate to those places and go
Yeah.
into self-discovery mode.
Well, I would say it's really not that far out of the norm compared to the States. Here in the States, the vast majority of teachers don't get to travel and do the conferences and travel all over the place. But you just happen to be connected with some educators that make that a priority in their lives. And they are always traveling somewhere, doing something. And I know oftentimes just through our connections, we start to believe that that's normal. But it's not normal. A lot of what you do isn't normal, although you probably think it is. And I just want to highlight a few things that I think are like absolutely phenomenal. So I talk about the fact that a few years ago we were connected, and I remember out of the blue, I got this message from you saying, "Hey, what is your address? Where do you live?" I think you were making a road trip down to Florida or something, because you do this thing where you just randomly pop in and see people that you're connected with online and try to make that connection real. Talk to me a little bit about that. What drives you or drove you to start those connections?
Uh, well, Twitter changed my whole perspective on education, on PD, and these connections, and it sort of opened up because I myself, when I left my school to sort of do that contract working on policies and programs, I felt like I was in a rut. I felt like I was alone on an island, and I needed
Yeah.
to grow. And so I left and I did this thing, but then I was missing the whole school aspect. And so when I started on Twitter, started connecting with these educators, well, then I'm like, well, how can I maybe now meet these people? I mean, we started doing FaceTime, we started doing Skype and Google Hangouts, but I'm like, it's not the same thing as being in a school. And so honestly, I don't know where it first started, but as we started connecting and we started, it'd be fun to hang out and this and that. And I remember going to see one teacher in Pennsylvania. And then on the way, I know one of the other connections that I had was sort of off trip, but sort of on the way. And then so I remember calling her principal and saying, I want to surprise her. Is it okay if I just sort of stop in? And so if I can stop in, or if I know I'm going somewhere and I know that educators will be there, we'll sort of do what we can. So I think it was last year, we went on a road trip from Canada and we went to Florida with the family.
Yeah.
And we already did the Disney trip. So this was just sort of a let's drive down for our spring break, which is in March. And we spent 2 days driving to get there, 2 days back, and 5 days in Florida. But on the way, we were passing through where Tamara Letter lives. And so I remember exchanging with her, and she's like, oh my God, can we try and meet up and this and that? Because she included me in her book. And so she actually drove out 45 minutes out of the way to where our hotel was. And we got a chance to meet and spend probably about 2 hours together. And she met my family and that. So when I can meet these people, and I mean, I went to Florida, met with a whole bunch of teachers, spent 3-4 days the year before that, I will try and do what I can. And if I can go to different conferences, I mean, we had a whole meetup in New Jersey at a conference that I was going to present at. And then suddenly Catherine Williams, who's from Australia,
Right.
she flew out. to meet out a couple of people, and then we'll all come to your conference. And so it's just this amazing connection that we try and make possible, make real. And if we can do it, I mean, excellent. And if I could surprise people, I mean, that's just sort of a bonus. I love to do that.
This is going to sound so bad, but you are so stereotypical Canadian because here in the States, we look at Canada, we think, man, those people there are just so stinking nice. They just do anything they can to bring a smile to somebody's face. Do you feel like you are the norm, or do you realize that what you do is special?
I think most of the time and maybe it's the connections I have, I just feel everyone is like this. I always try and go that extra mile if I can. I remember the one year, I think I sent out close to 100 Christmas cards out to teachers, connections, my family, and that. I sometimes find it difficult. This year I sent a little bit less, family life, work life. It sort of gets in there, but when I can prioritize, when I can really find that time, I think it's something, I mean, when someone gives me that time, I appreciate it. So if I could give that time, but I don't know, and maybe it's just the people I see, I feel like I don't stick out. I feel like so many people do it. And then I hear other people saying, well, it's not the norm. And I guess it just, not that it baffles me, it surprises me
Yeah.
because I see so many people doing amazing things.
Well, it makes a huge impact on people. It really does. So, I mean, whether it's normal or not, keep doing it, man, because it empowers people. It makes people feel value. And I can only imagine the relationship you have with the students in your school too. Is that where you hang your hat and you say, man, that is what I do. I am the king of kindness everywhere I go, in my classroom as well.
I wish I remembered who started that. It's called the Canadian King of Kindness. And I'm like, really? No, but it's, I think relationships, especially at the high school level, when I started working, I found they were so key to everything we do. And I remember reading Culturize and Jimmy Casas, relationships,
Yeah.
relationships, relationships, or when kids deserve it, when you read it and you look at that relationship, but it's so important. It drives everything. And so I always make sure, like when I came back to the school after being gone for 3 years, I felt like not that I didn't belong, but I mean, everyone had all these backstories. Everybody knew these students from, okay, when he was in grade 9 and that, and I came in and I'm like, well, I don't know who these people are. And so I had to sort of rebuild those relationships. But I think that's such an important piece. And I mean, I'll spend time between classes, always in the halls, talking to people. I will spend as much time as I can outside of my classroom talking to students, to teachers, laughing, just to build those relationships. Because I think that's part of the fun part of the day. And I think it gives so much to them, but honestly, it brings so much to me as well.
So how do you find balance between that at work and at home? Because it's exhausting at times to pour yourself into others, to make those connections and make them meaningful. Um, is there ever a conflict between the amount of time you spend with whether it's online connections or your classroom connections or home, or how do you prepare yourself to find those priorities and carve out the time?
Balance is always going to be tough, and I still haven't figured it out. My schedule is out of whack. Those who got to know me on Twitter for the first time, I mean, because I wasn't in a school and I was working more in an office and in districts and that, my nights were different. And so there were some weeks I could do like 20 Twitter chats.
Right.
I was just all over the place. If you look at me now, I don't do as many Twitter chats. I'll still try and do as many as I can. But at some point, I have to grade, I have to plan. I have my family, my daughters are growing up. I want to be there for them. I want to be there and have time with my wife, and she's also an educator. And so finding that balance is tough. I was talking to someone, I call myself a fitness enthusiast because I like to work out, but I often cut it out because I need more time for school. And so balance is important. I wish I had this magic formula to say this is how you'll find balance, but I still struggle with balance on a daily basis. It's one of those jobs you have to give yourself so much, and it's sometimes tiring, but it gives me energy. I'm someone who doesn't sleep a lot just naturally, but I mean, there is no magic answer for that one.
Do you ever see yourself leaving the classroom again and giving yourself some more of that time?
Uh, I think, and I mean, I'm not going to project myself completely in the future. I don't have a crystal ball, but if I left the classroom again, it would be to be an administrator. I eventually do want to be a principal, I think. But right now, where I am just so happy where I am
Yeah.
that for the foreseeable future, for now, I don't see myself leaving the classroom.
Okay. So then what is next for you? Are you pouring your all into your current reality, or are you embarking on the next phase of whatever that might be?
I always work on some side passion projects, something here, something there. I mean, I just came back last week from a conference in Toronto on reading. If I can sort of get away and go present and just go learn, I mean, I will always go do that as long as that there's not a negative impact on my students as well. So I'll keep doing little things like that. I like to write, I like to read, but I mean, I don't know, right now I feel like my focus, other than my family and my daughters growing up, is really on trying to find those things that work with kids. All those things that when I first started on Twitter and I was talking about, and I'm like, I wonder what would it look like in the classroom. Well, now I'm just testing it all out, and really, believe me, I have some bad days. It's not all rosy. It's not because we're on all these Twitter chats, we have all these answers. I have the good days, I have the bad days, but it's really this trial and error phase of my life where let me just try what I can and have fun with those students.
Now, how old are your kids?
They're in grade 2 and 3, so 9 and 7.
Okay. So as an educator, dad, how do you balance being a supportive parent, yet also this innovative teacher, and making sure that your own kids are getting the best, fullest experience in education? I say this because, like, for example, I'm not allowed to go to parent teacher conferences because I ask the questions that probably shouldn't be asked, and I probably push a little bit harder than I need to. What's that dynamic look like for you?
Well, we have two educators in the household, so at
Yeah,
some
I
point
can only imagine.
we have to go. I think we try and balance each other out. My wife works a lot with my kids on innovative stuff as well. Uh, I'm more of the pedagogy person when it comes to balance and finding out, okay, well, I want my kids to experience some stuff, but I also don't want to tell a teacher how to do stuff.
Right.
And these are my colleagues. We're in the same union, we're in the same district. I'm not there to tell them what to do, but I'm someone who'll be open to conversation. I've met with the principal many times, had discussions, had talks, but I think I've been fortunate to have some amazing teachers with amazing hearts that work with our daughters. But sometimes I have these ideas that I really want to see happen with them, but I'm never going to impose them. I don't think that's my place. It's a tough spot to be in when you're that parent educator and you're talking to another educator. But then I also think I'm in a different place. I've had different opportunities. So sometimes you just have to work with your kids a bit at home, have those discussions. But I think it's also important to take that step back sometimes. As
That's
long
good.
as it's not hurting my kids, I just can't always control everything.
That's good, because I asked that question because one of the things that I really appreciate about you is not only are you super kind and nice and generous, but you are completely honest and transparent as well. If there are things that are said that you disagree with, you have no problem saying, "Hey, I take offense to that," or I disagree, but you do it in the most respectful way possible to prolong the engagement and to continue the conversation. You don't just throw a jab out there and call people an idiot. You say, "Hey, I disagree, and here's why," and let's have that conversation. It's almost like you are modeling the beauty of what social media could hold for all of us. So many take social media and use it as a weapon. They can sit behind their little screen and text or type whatever they want, thinking that I'm just going to send my negative vibes across the universe. But you use it to constantly build people up and to build a larger conversation. What is that hill that you are willing to die on, in terms of education? What's that thing that you say, yeah, you talk about reading being your jam.
Yeah.
What is your jam? And if it's reading, why reading?
Uh, I mean, reading, and it's funny, reading, literacy, there's this big debate, which one do we
Right,
talk
right,
about?
right.
Uh, but it's one of my friends, Brent Gilson, who's a teacher out in Alberta, and he shared his Kylie Beer's quote where it's, books are meant to be loved, they're not meant to be taught.
Mm,
And I think that was a big
that's good.
change when I came back into the classroom. I'm like, we work so much as teachers, focus on reading, focus how fast you read, focus on understanding what you read, that we forget that kids, when they get to high school and when they leave, most people don't enjoy reading anymore. And if I talk to many of my former students, well, I mean, they'll read on social media, they'll
Yeah.
read signs, they'll read ads, but reading a book, so many of them just drop it because they associate reading with work
Yeah.
and all this work and sort of going deep instead of just pure enjoyment. And so I think one of the big missions I've put myself on since I've come back is how can I instill that love of reading? How can we really have fun? And I mean, fun story from now, I brought in a few books, and I always tell teachers, I mean, I just told teachers at a conference I was at, I don't have extra money when I go into the classroom. I came back. It's not like principals are throwing money at me. I wanted to give access to books. So I had so many books donated to my classroom when I went back, because that was something that I put out in social media. Lucky enough that people answered my call. I needed some class sets. People donated class sets, but we're now studying Dear Martin since last year in my classroom. And Nick Stone just sort of wrote a part 2, and it's out in October, but social media, she put out the book cover. I put out this comment. I now have 2 ARCs, 2 advanced reader copies. And I'm actually sharing that with a couple of students who rediscovered the love of reading through the books we read. And I actually have a student reading it tonight who started it today. And he's like, can I talk to you about it at school the next time?
Oh, let's hope there's a snow day, man, so I can keep plowing through tomorrow.
Well, I think he actually told me he's probably going to finish it tonight.
Okay.
But to see kids find that excitement in reading and want to talk to me about it, I mean, when I see that happen, then I know I actually did something right.
That's awesome.
And so all these things about chapter questions and comprehension and literacy tests, and whether it's state testing in the States, this is what my jam is. I want them to love what they're doing, to have fun, to learn, to find that curiosity. And that's where I'm going to be really focusing on.
So what you talk about the state tests here in the States, what does that look like there in Canada? Is there that same level of accountability? I'll use that term while I roll my eyes. Is there that same level of top-down progress monitoring, I'll call it?
It's very similar. I think one of the big differences is in a lot of states, and I know it's not the same in all the states, but a teacher's job will never hang in the balance of testing results. Whereas I know in some states it does, and they will never close the school down or make it a private school or whatever, because of we don't have letter grades for schools.
Okay.
But we do have literacy and math tests in grade 3, in grade 6, a math test in grade 9, and a literacy test in grade 10. Okay. The only thing that really counts is all our high school students, they need to pass that literacy test in grade 10 to get their diploma.
Okay.
Everything else is just sort of a monitoring piece to see, well, how are kids doing?
So schools use it internally. Okay.
Yeah, but then honestly, some parents will use it to shop around schools. And they'll be like, well, I want to live in this district because they do better on testing. To me, honestly, it doesn't have a bearing whatsoever.
And do you think that because of that model, you're freer to utilize your passion and to say, I'm just going to teach the love of reading? Do you feel like if there was a different level of, again, accountability, you might feel that pressure and say, no, I'm just supposed to teach to the test? Or do you think you would, if you were to be transplanted here to a state here in America, that you would continue to be you and stay true to that love?
I think it depends. If you talk to me at the beginning of my career, I've done everything for that state testing because I was that compliant person that wanted to please. Where I am now, I think, and I'm just now talking hypothetical, but wherever I'd go, I'm the person who I will push back. I wrote at one point a blog post about stretching the box. Yeah. If you can't break the box, well, stretch it as far as you can. And by no means am I a yes man. I will push back as much as I can. I won't break a relationship, but I will push back as much as I can if I believe that this is the right thing to do. And I will stand up to something, but in standing up, I'll make sure I have the research. I'll make sure I bring in all the arguments that I need. I won't just be talking, well, because this is a preference. I will go find the answers that I need to prove my point. But if I believe in something, I'm like that dog with the bone. I will keep at it just to do what I believe is right.
That's awesome, man. And again, yet another reason why I admire you, because you're true to your cause. It's not just to rile people up. It's because it's what you believe, and you do it in the kindest, most respectful way possible. It's powerful. It's powerful. I appreciate what you do. So, we've covered a lot here. We've covered your personal life, your professional life, your journey, your hill to die on, if you will. If you had to wrap it all up and say, man, there's so much in this world that I want people to understand, so much that I want them to know, but this is my thing. And, I pick up my microphone for this. And if you had the opportunity to say something, drop the mic and walk off stage, and that's gonna be the last thing people remember of you, What is that thing that you want people to fixate on and to resonate with?
I think in the past year, I've been focusing a lot because as much as we've been talking about kindness, and I mean, I truly believe, I mean, when we talked about social media and saying, well, there's a way to approach people when you don't agree with something. And I'm an adamant believer in that. You don't, if you want to put something forth, if you don't believe in something that someone says, you have the right to question it, but there's a way that you should do it to make sure you're not tearing that person down.
Right.
You're having that conversation. So that's important. But I've been focusing a lot on how to create and foster and build hope with everyone, because a lot of educators were tired. Some people don't make it and leave the profession and go to other stuff. Some people don't want to be in the classroom anymore. Some people keep talking about how the job is difficult, and it is. It's not an easy job. But how can we create that hope? How can we bring that joy, that compassion back to what we're doing? Because I hear some colleagues tell kids, oh, you should never go into teaching. It's so difficult. I mean, that's, we're doing such a disservice. We need amazing humans, but we also can't give everything and not take care of ourselves. And I know I've learned that the hard way, where I've sort of pushed myself at some point to the point where I'm so tired and then I don't feel like going to work. But to the point of, well, how do I find that balance? But how do we inspire people, and how do we create that hope, saying there are so many things we have to cover, but let's find a way to do it together. Let's be there, support each other, and let's keep that sort of hope alive in our community. And I think building that community is such an essential aspect within your school, but also globally. That's been my biggest change, is my global community that I've built through Twitter and through education and through learning.
That's awesome, man. It's great that what you just said, they're not just platitudes. I mean, you actually live it, you believe it, and you preach it. And that's what's so admirable. It's not just it's not just speech. It's not just you talking. It's not you just throwing out 280 characters at a time telling people to connect and be kind. You truly believe it, and it makes you who you are, and that makes other people better in the process. Roman, I appreciate you more than you know. I appreciate all that you're doing. I appreciate all that you say, all that you stand for. I can't wait to just continue to track your journey and maybe come work for you someday as you're a principal leading the school. Granted, I can barely speak English, let alone any other language. So it might be a little bit of a struggle for me. So just keep doing what you're doing, man. Keep changing lives, keep changing destinies, and continue to connect with us. We're all growing better because of you.
Thank you so much. And honestly, if I'm growing like this, it's because of all the amazing people that I'm connected to. I will never take full credit, because the amount of learning I've done because of everyone else who's out there and the connections I made, I mean, they are so much, as much part of my journey as I am a part of theirs.
It's awesome, man. All right. Well, I appreciate you taking time out of your day, your schedule, your life. I'm going to pray for a snowstorm for you. Hunker down and let tomorrow be a sleep in day.
We will see how that goes, hopefully.